Hi, I'm Alana. Welcome to Darroch Nurseries. We're a social enterprise based in the Central Belt and we specialise in growing native Scottish trees. Over the next few weeks we're going to make some videos to share with you all the cool stuff we're doing here, talk to you about trees and why we grow them, what we grow, how we grow them, and share with you our stories. Welcome to the inside of our main growing tunnel. This is where we start off all of our trees in seed trays. Once they're sort of large enough, we prick them out and put them into individual cells, and this is where they then grow up. Once they're big enough, they'll go outside to harden off, which means that they'll get subjected to the rain, to the wind, and that will help them develop really good root systems, really good sort of collars, and grow strong, because we want strong trees that are going to be able to survive in the wild. Anything that's coddled too much isn't going to do well when it's planted out, so we want our trees to be really strong and survive. So here we've got alder that's growing. This is local to us here in West Lothian, and it will be planted back out into West Lothian, which is particularly important for us. That's what we want. We want our trees to be planted back out in the area that they come from. That's the local provenance bit of what we do. And that's for a lot of reasons. We've got different areas in Scotland, different elevations. Trees will start producing their fruit at different times, and that's all in sync with the seasons. So a tree that is from the central belt of Scotland at a low elevation is going to have a hard time being planted out, for example, 300 metres up in the Cairngorms. So we try and keep our trees as local as possible if we can. So down here we've got some of our hazel growing. This is large enough to be going out to harden off fairly soon. Behind me here, this is our Scots pine. This is fairly young. We planted it a little bit later in the season because we're just preempting it for next year. So we're giving it a little bit of extra time. So it means we'll have a good sized tree at the end of next year in about November time when planting season starts. And we're starting to do that with a few of our trees, largely because the growing seasons are becoming much more challenging. Things are struggling to grow as fast because there's more stresses with what the weather's doing. So we're just extending our growing seasons to give us that space and plan for things taking a bit longer. And that's just the nature of it at the moment, quite literally. We've started growing on some of our trees into bigger pots as well. So you can buy an individual tree for your garden or as a memorial tree. So we have a few of them that we're trialling out in different size pots. That's a new thing for us, but let us know if you want some individual trees. Tell us what you're after, what size, see what we can do, because we're trying to get a sense of what people want and be able to supply that. Back here we have loads of our seed trays. This is where we started off most of our species that we grow, and this is where they'll stay, and we'll just continuously pot things up as they grow. All of this here is Rowan, mostly local to West Lothian as well, which is great. So on this side of the polytunnel is where our seed trays are, and this is where we start off most of our species. And as the season progresses, we'll prick these out into the cells that you see on the other side, and then they'll eventually go outside. But this is where it all starts. This is the literal nursery bit. And we've got loads of different species here, from wild cherries, we've got some elder in here, we've got wych elm, which we collected last month in June, and we've got hawthorns and dog roses here. We've had a fairly tricky season so far, with really hot and dry weather for weeks quite early on in the spring, when our trees were starting to germinate and grow and when they were really vulnerable. And so that is a stress for young trees, and we were expecting it to have an impact in some way. They're a bit more susceptible to diseases, and in this year a few of our trees have had powdery mildew, which is only normal and is going to happen, but that is a result of sort of the hot, dry conditions that we had early on in the growing season. But we're managing it. The trees have grown large enough to survive that, but we do have a little sick bay here for the worst of them. And I'll show you them in close-up so you can have a look at what's not working so well, because that inevitably is part of what happens in a tree nursery. Things don't always go well, and that is just part of working with nature, and we try to manage it as best as we can. But it means as well that the trees that do survive are really strong, and we know that from the people who have planted our trees, that our trees have been doing really well. They are really strong, and that's really the aim, because we want our trees to grow into granny trees, ones that survive for the next as long as possible, really. That's our ultimate aim. Here's some of our hawthorn that has powdery mildew. It's okay though, because you can still see there's quite a bit of green growth. It's not killing the tree yet. Obviously there are some dead ones in here because this sort of coincided with the really hot period, so we have had casualties. This is one of the worst looking trays, but hopefully those that are sort of still showing signs of growth will continue to grow, that's our hope. But this is just, again, part of the reality of growing trees. And we've got the same here on our dog rose. So dog rose and hawthorn seem to be most susceptible to it. We do get it on our oak trees as well, but oak doesn't really get affected too badly by it, so I'm not that worried. But again, looking at sort of fresh growth, some casualties, but overall not massively bad. Seed collection has kicked off again. July and August is when we start collecting cherries. So this is part of our very first collection. This is wild cherry. So within the cherry, you'll get a seed. I don't know if you can see that. See the seed there? That's a cherry seed. We'll stratify these, which means it's subjected to a period of cold and then hot and then cold again, and that will help start germination. So we're not going to sow these immediately. They're going to go away and have a cold winter, a hot summer, and another cold winter. So it will be spring, let me do the maths, spring 2027 when we sow these, and that's when they'll grow. And if we have a good growing season in 2027, we will have wild cherry trees by October 2027 ready to plant out for the planting season. If we don't get a good growing season, it might not be till 2028 that we have a plantable tree. So there's a long time scale involved in growing trees, and I think it's one of the things that surprises people the most when they learn. But we have to factor this in our nursery setting, because every tree sort of has slightly different preferences and timescales, so there's a lot to balance and juggle there. But these are our wild cherries, and we're about to kick off sort of the main seed collection season from August. I mean, it's early this year. We're a few weeks early with seed collection, so I'm going to have to get going pretty soon. But from August through to September and October, we'll be collecting most of our tree species, and I'll be inviting you along on that to show you what we do and what that looks like, how we do it, and then what we do with the seeds afterwards. So those will be for some future videos, but I'll take you along for the ride. So I've shown you our main growing tunnel where we start everything off, and I'm going to take you over to our other tunnel, which is a net tunnel. It's a netted outdoor tunnel where some of our trees go once they're big enough to go outside. Now the net tunnel is one of my favourite places. And I'll take you in here in a minute. But the net tunnel is wonderful because it takes off the edge of all the extremes that we're getting. So that's, high winds, heavy rain, shade when it's really sunny. So it helps regulate things a lot more for our trees, which is really important because things are starting to get more extreme more often and more challenging. So this is one of the ways that we sort of deal with that. But come inside and I'll show you what we do. Welcome to our net tunnel. This is outside, but obviously has a little bit of protection with the netting here. It's a great environment for growing trees. They really love it. We've got a mixture of trees here, so most of what's behind me, particularly on here, that's all oak. We've got some amazing rowan coming up from this year as well, and really love them. We've got some elder here at various stages. We've got elder from last year that we've potted up into individual pots, and they've just taken off. They're super happy. And we've also got some of the other potted trees here that we're experimenting with in different sizes. So we've got Scots pine, for example. So if you're after a Scots pine, let us know. These are beautiful ones from the Cairngorms originally. But we've got a few other ones. We've got oak as well. So again, let us know if you have any particular trees that you want in bigger individual pots, and we can grow those as well. On our right here, on my right, we've got some willows. These are willows that didn't grow to size last year, so we've kept them on for another year. And you can see they've put on some really great growth here, and they look great. We have had a bit of an irrigation issue with a blocked outlet basically, so we had a few days before I noticed it. I do test my irrigation every once in a while to make sure it's still working, because it is so crucial to growing trees, especially with the weather that we've had. So there's an automatic sprinkler system in here that's on a timer, as well as our outdoor trees, which I'll show you later. But we did have a couple of days where it wasn't firing because of the blockage in here. So I have a few trees that I've lost to that. Some of them might still survive, but there are a couple that didn't quite make it. But the rest are looking absolutely fantastic. So we've got eared willow here as well as grey willow. I'll show you our outdoor area now as well to show you the rest of our trees are outside. So they're totally exposed to everything and a different set of management required there. So I've shown you the net tunnel, and I'm going to take you to our outside hardening off area, which doesn't have any sort of protections like our other two tunnels do. And this is where the rest of our trees are for most of the growing season, to be honest. So once they are big enough to come outside, harden off, this is where they come. So we've got a few different species here, and again, a selection of things that we're growing into bigger trees, which is really exciting. They're doing really well. But I'll give you a little bit more of a close-up tour. And again, you can see these are hawthorns in the back here. You see a little bit of discoloration from the powdery mildew, but it's nowhere near as bad as the hawthorns that are in the main polytunnel. And I think that will have a lot to do with the different sort of levels of ventilation and the amount of moisture in the air, basically. I've forgotten the word for it, but yeah, I think you'll know what I mean. So behind me here are Scots pine that we're growing. They're having a fantastic year, looking really happy. They've put on loads of great growth this year as well. One of the other features we have out here are rodent-proof boxes. So loads of tree seeds are really tasty to mice, voles, birds. So whilst they're stratifying, so that period where they're being subjected to cold and then hot and then cold, a lot of the high value seeds are stored in these rodent-proof boxes, and that prevents mice or whatever coming in and eating all the seeds over the winter, which has happened. I've lost entire crops of blackthorn, rowan and hawthorn in when I thought they were well enough protected and they weren't. So top tip, definitely protect your seeds because they will get eaten. Same for oak, same for hazel. Keep them out of reach or they'll get eaten over the winter and you won't have any. Our outside sprinkler system is also on an automated timer. So I've got both a net tunnel and this outside area set to irrigate automatically. And I've got a device where you can set the timings, duration, days, so I can program all of that. But it means that all of this gets watered and I don't have to do it by hand, which I used to do before I got this stuff. So this saves a lot of time now that I've got to a particular sort of scale. So these are stand sprinklers and they just sprinkle around. I've got 2 of them. There's the other one. I only need the 2 in this space at the moment. I do have a third, but we haven't ended up needing them at all. So they're an absolute lifesaver and a time saver, and I highly recommend. I got them from National Tunnels. Shout out to Nigel Carr. He sorted me out with all my irrigation needs, as well as our big polytunnel and the net tunnel. So if you need supplies, highly recommend Nigel. He's fab. So that's a sort of brief nursery tour to start off with. Thanks everyone for watching. Let us know in the comments what other videos you'd like us to make. We'll totally do that if we can. And I'll see you next time.